supposed to be a leader for my team. I'm supposed to be a Christ follower.
Set your own path. You know, you don't have to do what everybody else is doing. Make the right decisions. I got Callix Crabbe, the assistant hitting coach of the Texas Rangers, with us on the podcast today. Thanks for joining me, man.
I appreciate you, X, for having me. Obviously, like we were kind of talking about before we went live, a unique opportunity, I think, for all of us, unique situation, making sure I'm sensitive to what's going on because we're all being affected. We're all being affected by it. But anytime I get to talk and get away from my kids' schoolwork, right? Like, and speak with good peoples, I'll take it, you know?
Definitely, man. And I'm glad that you said that, especially with this time going on right now, it's a tough time for a lot of people, but also a time where we need to connect with other people in any way possible because we're not able to get out as much. So I think this is good. And I appreciate you, setting aside some time. And just to give a little background on you, not only is Callix a hitting coach for the Rangers, but he also has put in a great amount of time providing hitting instruction for young athletes. He's very well versed in the latest hitting technology, videos, analytics, you name it. But before I get into all that, I got 3 rules for the podcast, man.
All right.
You got to be honest, you got to be yourself, and don't hold back. So we good?
I think if you know me, those 3 things are pretty much a part of my my daily processes. So yeah, we should be good.
That's why you're on here, Extraordinary Athletes Podcast. Now I've been following the Instagram, and it looks like you've been able to use this time well. You've been able to stay busy. I see a lot of working out, a lot of hanging out with the family, seeing little man doing some hitting drills. Looks like you're able to stay busy. Is that correct?
Yeah, so I naturally have a hard time being bored. I think I think it's an opportunity that a time I'll never probably get ever again. In hopefully ever again in my timeline. Getting to see my family daily. My son, obviously, I don't want to discount my daughter because my daughter she's obviously very special too. But my son is taking a little bit more to sports at this time, so we're utilizing that time to improve and gain some skill, acquire some skill. It's been good. So the workouts I'm doing, a combination of insanity workouts with my boys up at Diesel Fitness, my partners doing some of their functional movement stuff. So I'm trying to get my beach body back, you know what I mean, during this pandemic.
So you had a beach body at one point.
At one point, when I was, I'm 37 now, when I was like 21, right? Like,
yeah. That's what I'm talking about, man. That's good though. And, we kind of mentioned earlier before the podcast, you having to help out the kids with the school. That's got to be a weird type of situation, them doing online schooling now, right?
Yeah, so I think there needs to be a little bit of, empathy being kind of displayed. I think the first 2 weeks that we got home, the first week we didn't have any school because the county was obviously trying to get things set up and kind of test it and kind of try things that needed to be improved upon. And then so week 1 of it wasn't too daunting just because things weren't being graded. They were giving more time, in terms of meeting certain deadlines. It wasn't as rigorous. And then week 2 got a little bit more serious, right? Like, and unfortunately during that time, Amanda and I, and then the kids, we kind of took advantage of sleeping. I hadn't had a chance to sleep in like 10 years, literally. And I think, the importance of routines were more on display than ever before, really. So after last week, we decided that, look, we're gonna act like we have a regular work week. Like you're waking up in the morning, kids, you're gonna wake up, you're gonna get your breakfast. We're gonna go for a walk together outside. Get the vitamin D, get things coming in, and then Amanda and I will get our workout in, and then we'll get to the computer, and then we'll attempt to try to stay on task. That seems to be working a little bit better. We still ain't hitting on all cylinders just yet. Okay, I ain't hitting on all cylinders yet. but I'm committed. I've always been focused on getting better, and I completely, candidly need to get better at this. So I'm getting there. I'm getting there.
I'm sure that kind of brings it back, a lot of the subject matter that they're probably learning, probably brings it back a little bit and reminds you of some of the stuff that you were studying as a young boy. And for some of our listeners who are wondering where that deep accent is coming from, my man is from the Virgin Islands, so so if you hear a little accent,
if it come out, I apologize.
No, that's that sweet sound. That's what that is right there. No, but man, does it suck right now not being in season? Like just not having the jersey on? What's the worst part about not being on the field right now or in the dugout?
You know, I when we went into this past off season as an organization, right? Like from a hitting department to a pitching department, just to an overall philosophy, we were trying to improve very specifically in some areas so that we can kind of close the gap from a win column standpoint. You know, if it's 4 or 5 wins more to get us closer to a wild card, we felt like we had attained much of those initiatives, and it was holding true throughout spring training. We felt like our starting rotation, the depth of our rotation was much improved, and quite frankly, one of the stronger points of our team. And we were moving in the right direction with, obviously, you know, the addition of Corey Kluber. Kyle Gibson was actually further along in his recovery from a situation that he was dealing with. And so I think we were clicking all cylinders. The offense was looking really good. We were starting to kind of gain our identity as a collective unit. And it was literally 12 days away from us breaking camp. We're going to start making our final decisions on who was going to be on the roster. We had a good group of guys that were fighting for a position on the team. And obviously we were being updated, you know, periodically throughout spring training on the COVID-19 situation. We weren't naive. We weren't being ignorant to the situation. We knew that it was real, and it could either go left or it can go right, but all indications were that it was probably going to shift in the left direction, which means in the wrong direction. So yeah, obviously there's a level of disappointment that I think that we're all dealing with as an organization, but at the same time, we know that there's bigger matters out there. There's people out there who don't have food to eat. There's people out there who don't have the adequate medical care that they need to try to combat, you know, the virus. And the reality of the situation is it's affecting rich, poor, Black, white, Hispanic, you know, Asian, it don't matter. Every community, European, everyone's being hit at the exact same time. So something that I've kind of expressed to a niece of mine who's younger and was trying to get her life started is like, you're not the only one. So like, if you start struggling because of this situation, know that it's a clean slate. Everyone's going to be coming back with some varying degree of a challenge. And I think it does come back down to whoever comes out of it and whoever uses it with the right mindset, who uses it or sees it as an opportunity, are the people that are going to come out on the better side of the line or the longer end of the stick. So
I think that's a great point. And, you know, just like you said, you have to use this time to your advantage the best way you can, the way that you're capable to. But how do we help young athletes or whoever it may be, not only young athletes, but some people are going through anxiety, depression, certain things from being at home and not able to necessarily go out and do their routine. We talked about routines a little bit earlier, get into the routine that they're normally in. How do we get past those hurdles or those struggles? What do we do to help some of those young kids?
You know, I think the first thing we have to do as parents is I think we have to look at this as truly as an opportunity to kind of educate them and to help them kind of appreciate what they've had up until this point. And I don't want to. I definitely I don't like beating up generations because I work with this generation on a regular basis, but I do believe that there's some sort of auto correction that's kind of taken place for this Gen Z. Uh, Not in a negative way,
Right.
but along the lines of like, look, things have been good for all of you, especially the 9 and 10 year olds and 11 year olds. And I think if we can find different outlets, like I had my kids look at a podcast, or excuse me, not a podcast, a documentary, excuse me, from from the Great Depression. And I know some people will probably think that's a little bit harsh, but I don't believe so. I think that the reason that me individually, and I'm sure you have your own stories as well, we've been able to succeed in life is because of those very early on challenges that we had in our youth. Um, I truly believe that I'm, individually more equipped than most to be successful during times like now because I have had challenges when I was a boy where I was eating saltine crackers for breakfast, where my mom and dad, they did the very best that they could to put eggs on the table, right? Like where on many days bread was my choice of food for breakfast, right? Where this generation of kids, they can order something on and was it some food delivery service and they can come
Uber
right to the
Eats or
house.
something
Uber
like
Eats,
that.
right? You know what I'm saying? Like there's a host of vehicles that we can use to get these things. So in some ways, as sad as it is, and it definitely is a sad situation, I do think that there's some opportunity for some of our young athletes to appreciate kind of what they've had up until this point, so that when it does come back to some sense of normalcy, they'll be able to appreciate it more and they can attack a little bit more diligently and have more appreciation.
I think that's an awesome point. I think that you're basically saying that they can use this period as an opportunity for growth, and and when specifically talking about athletes and maybe some of those Texas Ranger players that you're dealing with on a day-to-day basis, or maybe not a day-to-day basis now, but usually,
But even so, yeah.
yeah, how do we help them during this down period? With you being in Florida, some of them being spread across the United States, how do you stay connected with them, and what's the advice for them? And I'm sure you're providing them with words of encouragement. How do you keep them focused during a time like this and not saying, hey, let me lay back a little bit. I don't know when we're going to get started. I can use this time as some rest. How do you keep them motivated or keep them locked in right now?
Well, I think one of my close friends said this best, that failure and challenging times are when the most growth actually take place. And so on a real note, like there's no greater time in the history of man to have a pandemic than right now. The reality is that we have a great means of communication in video conferencing like we're doing right now, social media, a cell phone. It's so easy now to get to see someone's face like you and I are doing right now. And from an organizational standpoint, I think we view this as a great opportunity to get ahead of our competition, because we know that our competition, some of them are laying down right now because of the uncertainty that's being accompanied with the layoff or the time away from baseball. And so what we've done is we connect with our guys pretty much daily in some form. I have a group of 8 players that I essentially that I keep in contact with. Obviously, I keep in contact with the whole group. One of my main rules is to make sure that the lines of communication throughout the year is running smoothly. So we have a group chat. We have some video game challenges that we have with our guys. We actually had a Zoom call last Friday at 9 p.m. where every hitter pretty much every hitter. A couple of guys couldn't make it because of time zones, but every hitter was on there. We had a good time, making fun. They were cracking up on me. I was cracking up on them.
I was gonna say,
So,
I can only imagine how little hitting was being talked during that
dude,
meeting.
let me tell you something. There was not one talk about hitting. I can't, for the fact that we're gonna keep this PG-13, right? Like there was some funny. I mean, for me, it's comical, right? Like it's entertainment because it brings me back to the idea that even though they're grown men, they're still playing a game that most of us have loved from the very first time that we picked up a bat and a ball and put on our very first uniform. I think that love, if we're still in baseball to some degree, that love is very strong and very, very much ignited on a daily basis. So yeah, to answer the question, or finish answering the question, we're doing a pretty good job of staying connected with our guys because we do know that there's a lot of anxiety that's taking place right now. There's a lot of fear that a lot of players are accompanying with this time. We know, again, there's bigger issues, but there's guys that were in their first years of arbitration. There were guys that were coming up on free agency for next year. Obviously, there's small issues with the grand scheme of things, but since we're talking about baseball, we kind of have to make our fans and the audience know that these are real fears for players, right? Like, and so what we have to do as a coaching staff and as friends to these guys and mentors for these guys is to make sure that we keep down any fear or doubt that they may have, so that when we do start back up, that they're ready to go. And then the physical component, not to ramble on, but the physical component's a very important one. Because of the uncertainty of when we're going to start, we need to make sure that our players are, from a pure competitive advantage standpoint, they keep moving. We know that a body that stops moving is a body that starts to die. And we know that if we ask them to ramp back up their training quite quickly, there can be some huge negative ramifications for such a lack of focus and a lack of consistency in their routines, even as something that, as little as body weights, movement prep, some game sense stuff that helps them with their timing. These things can prove to be invaluable whenever we do start baseball back up.
Yeah, I like that you expressed that it's not solely the physical aspect of things that goes into it. There's a lot of mental things that have to be applied daily as a baseball player, and a lot of those things are not being able to be done on a field capacity. So I like the idea that you guys have been able to Zoom and get together as a group, because we know how important it is as a team to stay unified. And it's easy at this time to feel alone. So I like the idea that you guys are using technology to stay connected. And you talked about, so some of these players are young players, maybe young hitters that are just now trying to establish themselves. Right. And it's a time of uncertainty for a lot of them. But I'm interested in knowing who's a young hitter in that organization that's coming up that we don't know about right now. Who's somebody that we need to be like, man, that I don't know his name, but I'm going to be watching him. I'm interested to know.
I do believe that the future is much brighter for the Texas Rangers organization. This past year, we were able to put in place a new a hitting coordinator that is going to work well with I think the new technologies. Not that our old hitting coordinator was bad, because Josue is still a part of our group. So I don't want to discount what he was able to do, because he did a tremendous job. But I even think for him, with Cody Atkinson coming on board, he's going to be able to help accelerate some of the coaches in some of the minor league coaches in our organization from a tech utilization, from some new methods and practices, daily practices in terms of player development that can help accelerate coaches. So with that being said, we have some good hitters, man. Our first round pick from last year is actually showing some signs of being being an elite hitter. Josh Jung, he went to Texas Tech. You know, has some idiosyncrasies in his swing, some things that you don't necessarily see with you know, quote unquote the elite hitter. But Josh has an elite mindset. This young man, you know, when we talk about hitting, we oftentimes focus too much on the swing, as conversations that you and I have had. The reality is having a good swing is important, especially if you don't have a good approach. If you
Right.
don't have a good approach, you need to have a good swing. Let's not like, let's be real. You can't have a bad approach and a bad swing, and vice versa. If you have a good approach, the worse the swing can be, right? Like, because you have the ability to dissect a pitcher and kind of move along with this game plan. But you know, I'm encouraged by Josh Jung. We have a young kid, center field prospect named Leody Taveras. He was once in the top 100 prospects of baseball, and he fell out of it last year. But in spring training this year, he was extremely impressive. His ability to control at bats, his ability to move at a pace that seemed to be slow and uninterrupted by obviously the challenges of being a baseball player in front of crowds, seemed to be turning in his direction. There's some more. I mean, if because of you can see the level of excitement that I have. There's a list of 10 guys that I wanna say, but I think that as a whole, if we continue to push the narrative that no one player is going to be the savior, but that every player that comes through our minor league system and hopefully circulates to our major league system at some point, they're all going to be prepared to help us win a World Series championship. I think is what we should really be focused on, more than one particular hitter. Quite honestly, I think every player has a role, and if we can continue to get them prepared so that once they show up to the big leagues, they're ready to contribute. I think that's super important.
Now you've talked about a lot of these hitters, and I'm glad that you mentioned some of their specific names, and I'm excited to see some of these guys as well. But what is one of the first things that you look at when you're looking at a young hitter, somebody that's maybe just coming into the organization, or even with you doing hitting instruction? What is one of the first things that you say, okay, I need to fixate my eyes on this part of his swing?
I think there's two levels, two varying levels when you look at an amateur versus looking at a pro. With an amateur, oftentimes when they show them to the cages, I think we have to put an emphasis on any technical improvements that they have to make, but not ignoring any emotional deficiencies that could be present in that person's.
How did I know you would say something like that, man?
We can't. I just don't think we can ignore it, right? Like,
Right.
From something as simple as when the kid shows up for the first time, I secretly look at the parents. I see how the parents are interacting, how the parents are responding or reacting to a poor swing or something that the player is doing. Oftentimes, that's a great indicator for how much stress that player is under, and is the player actually in control of their own journey, which I think is a very important idea for true growth of someone really in anything that they do. There needs to be a level of love and dedication, I think, that the player needs to have in order for them to live up. So yeah, you have that side, the left side, but then as a pro,
And you're able to kind of pick that up immediately.
quickly. Yeah. So one of the gifts that I think I have is because I have a childlike mind. I often I feel the same things that they're feeling. It's almost like the movie Green Mile comes to mind. I don't know why that just popped into my head, but it's like when I forgot the actor's name, but when he could actually feel the pain of the other person. I actually feel like I feel like that at times. Maybe not so much as a dad sometimes, because I want to beat my kids up when they're not doing well. But I do believe as an instructor, I have that gift. I always tell people that my superhero gift is empathy when it comes to baseball. because I remember how challenging the game was. So yeah, I definitely can see it. And then shifting to the pro side, obviously, pros bring very different intangibles to the table. They have um, they have different skills that may be able to override some of their deficiencies that could be present in their game. Oftentimes, it's not to use this as a hopefully it's not a poor example, but it could potentially be like someone who might have a lack of hearing, and then all of a sudden their eyesight gets a little bit sharper because of their survival instincts taking over. I think professional hitters have the ability to do that. So if I were to say there is one thing that is extremely important for a pro, I would definitely have to say it's the ability to make decisions in a batter's box, and make decisions under extreme stressful conditions. I think I try to pay attention to a hitter's ability to decipher spin from fastball. I do like seeing a hitter have the ability to hit a good fastball, but I also want to see a hitter have the ability to lay off of a good pitch as well. So I think when you get to pro ball, a good swing tends to start to fall down a little bit on the scale, but you can't neglect it, because again, you're facing some of the most elite pitchers, and having a good swing on the other token can actually help you over. It's just like the other skill of not being able to hear and being able to see. A good swing can absolutely give you a better chance when you're facing Justin Verlander, and he makes a mistake, and you're able to send off the best possible swing that you are. But I think there's a host of things that we look for in pros. There's no no exact definitive process that we look for. Like is it eyes first, versus the swing? Obviously, the eyes are extremely important. I believe that wholeheartedly, that you have to have the ability, not just so people misunderstand. I'm about to preach a little bit, so I apologize. I think people misunderstand what true vision is. Vision is, most of us as athletes, or excuse me, as baseball players, hitters, we have good vision. Let's be honest. We have the ability to track something that's moving very fast, but how easily does a player get distracted with their vision? Do we ask that question? How well do they take their eyes to the release point at the right time is more important than your general tracking ability, right? Like tracking the baseball is one part of vision. Predicting is also a part of vision. The ability, when you recognize spin, can you stay with that pitch long enough to know where that spin is going to land in the zone? Do you have the ability to know where certain pitches need to start in order for them to end as a hittable pitch versus a pitcher's pitch? That's a very important part of hitting. The ability to remain dynamic in the batter's box. That's a very important skill with hitting. Does the hitter have to manipulate bat speed in a batter's box, right? Like, do they have the type of bat speed that allows them to time well? So there's a number of things I can probably speak on this.
So you're not saying that we just go in the cage and start taking swings just to be. I don't think that.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, I definitely don't. Yeah, right. Like,
I mean, there's so much that goes into it, and like you said, you didn't want to preach, but I think that people do need to understand that there's so much that goes into it, that it's not just so much as okay, I'm getting some practice in the cage.
It's not cardio.
Right. There's so many aspects of it, and as a hitter, and me and you have worked together a lot. And I think that's another thing that's cool, is you kind of bring to the table multiple aspects of the hitting part, and say, hey, this may not be your problem, but this might be. So exactly. Let's check on this, or let's check off this. Or once we've checked off a few of these, let's check something else. Right. I think that there's so much that goes into it, and especially as young athletes and as professional hitters, we need to know what we need to be checking off and what we need to be continually working on, because it's not just like, hey, I did this today, now I'm done with it for the rest of the year. It's like, hey, do I need to keep working on certain things, and am I making my weaknesses my strengths now? So I think that you mentioned a good point. There's not just one thing that goes into it a lot of the times.
Yeah, it's that's such a wonderful point that you make. Oftentimes, I think the very beginning of a person's system or process should be a self-evaluatory portion of it, and an honest self-evaluation of it. I think more times than not, the reason that people are unable to be consistent as a hitter has more to do with their lack of honesty with themselves, poor
And
self-evaluation.
that's a crazy point in itself, because we're supposed to be professionals, right?
And that's a big part of being a professional, is knowing what you do well, and what you don't do well, on the flip side. And so I think that unfortunately is being pushed to the side a little bit too much, for various reasons. I think it's the kind of the time that we live in. I do believe that there's more people coaching baseball now, and unfortunately, and I don't want to, threading, or excuse me, when they said it's swimming, threading lightly. My accent came out, but treading water. So when you're treading lightly, like I'm going to tread lightly, but there's people who are coaching who unfortunately haven't had a high level of success, and that doesn't mean that you have to have had great success to be a good coach. I'm not inferring that. Like I'm not saying that's the case, but I do believe that as the gene pool gets a little bit bigger, with coaches who haven't had previous success or haven't had previous failure with success as well, I think that they focus more on the elements of performance that has to do with the physical stuff. And unfortunately, that's not always what's going to lead to consistency. We know that the mind, or the eyes tells the mind what's going on, but the mind kind of leads the body.
Right.
And we need to make sure that players understand that. So I don't believe that there is one magic pill. There is one specific area. I think that as a coach, you need to have the ability to analyze, not just physically analyze someone, but interpret and decode the emotional states along with their physical states, and then, but also what's their motivation. If you don't know what's motivating a player, we don't know what true challenges they have in front of them. If there's fear because they don't want to be, the parents might not love them all the way, they're not going to be free to play the game in a manner that's going to be enjoyable. If they're chasing dollars versus trying to have a great experience, we know that the lack of money is going to be one of their enemies, right? So there's a host of things. I mean, there's soul. You can talk about someone's soul if they don't have a true energy source that is of a great principle laden mindset or platform. I think then they're going to have another whole host of problems.
I mean, you're talking about the emotional state of the athletes that you deal with, playing 160 some odd games.
Sure.
Like, that is a long time throughout the season to be able to stay. As hitters, we're supposed to be able to stay balanced with maybe little ups and downs. But I think that's one of the toughest parts, is like, we have such a long season, and you as a coach, you don't have just one player, you have multiple players that you have to check in with and make sure that they're on the right emotional wave, like you said, the right spiritual wave, because that all affects their play. And as a player, as a former player who's been in the big leagues, that people have family issues, people have issues that maybe they're going, maybe have a drug issue, something, God forbid, but a lot of times that's a part of their life. A lot of people's routines get thrown off. So I think that you mentioning that emotional state is just as important, because that affects the play of a lot of players today, especially.
So yeah, I mean, it's it's funny. I'll use the example. I'll say player A because I don't want to use anyone's name. But player A started off well, had a small little rough patch, and then player A started struggling. And during that struggle, player A decides, "Hey, coach, like Krabby, let's go after a game. Let's hit." I refused.
Mm.
I refused. I said, "There's nothing that we're going to do after this game that's going to allow you to show up tomorrow and perform with the way that you're hoping because it's being motivated by the wrong energy source, right? Like you don't have your mind, you don't have your heart, you don't have these things, your soul. They're not. It's like one circle, another circle, another circle. Imagine three circles there. What's happening right now is those circles are separating from each other, and there's no amount of swings that you can take that's gonna pull you back the opposite direction and make you one, right? Like, so I explained to that player. I said, dude, like let's have a night off. Let's come back tomorrow and let's talk about what's really affecting your performance right now. And before you know it, the person got back on track. I won't go into to all of the details, but it was it was awesome to see. It was,
Yeah, you
awesome
didn't
to see.
even and for our listeners, you didn't even mention swings. You said let's
No,
talk. You said let's talk first.
very important.
And a lot of times that might just help solve the issue right there, right? Talking it out, talking about how I feel at the plate, maybe outside of the game. I think that, and I think that's another great point. You being an exceptional coach, not only recognize the physical aspect of things, but the mental aspect of things. And I think that all those things have to do with the player that's trying to evolve to be the best that they can be. Is they have to, like you said earlier, self-evaluate, and that just doesn't have to do with the physical aspect. So I'm really glad that you mentioned that.
It's so. I mean, I'm gonna give away my secret sauce to coaching, right? Like,
No,
but
you got too many. Don't try to
nah,
fool. No, let's not try to fool anybody.
but in reality, like I think what I've learned in the second part of my adult life, I mean, even in my marriage and anything, is like the best coaching attribute that I think that I can continue to grow is my ability to listen. Um, the reality is when I signed on to be the assistant hitting coach of the Texas Rangers, I was being signed on. I thought because of my extreme technical awareness of a baseball swing, and I've learned that the reason I was hired was because of my ability to decode people's emotional states, their physical states, and kind of like understand what was going on with their soul, or help them open up a little bit. And so I found myself, and obviously I have good technical skills, but I find myself focusing more on that than ever, quite honestly.
That's huge. And that is absolutely huge. I'm really glad that you mentioned that. And let's talk a little bit about this transition into coaching. After a successful career in your own right, making the big leagues with the San Diego Padres, what made you say, let's figure this hitting thing out, man? Because for me, that I feel like that's something I would run the opposite way from. After playing is like, man, and obviously it's not for everybody, but to me, like so much goes into it, and we've talked a lot about this. What made you say, let me go after it? What drove you to that?
So give me 4 minutes to maybe 5 minutes to kind of
Take your
give
time.
you the timeline of how this kind of came about. This is exactly, if I were to write a book, this is how I would say it in the book. Okay, like straight up. So in 2012, excuse me, leading up to 2012, after my last year, I went to Brazil to visit my wife's family. My wife is Brazilian, and we were celebrating Alana's, I believe it was her third birthday, or second birthday, excuse me. And I remember on the way back from Brazil, we landed in Miami, and before I took off from Brazil, I had a conversation with my agent, John Courtwright, and John and I had we were exchanging emails, and John was like, "Hey, I'm trying really hard to find you another job. Um, right now, there's not a whole lot of action." And he said, "Look, like you're really gifted. You're smart. Um, I want you to just start thinking about maybe what you want to do. You know, doesn't mean that your career is over with, but if like, are you willing to do independent baseball? Are you willing to take a double A job again if one presents itself?" And so I get back to Miami, and I remember sitting at the airport, and some will laugh at this, but this is literally how it happened. I'm sitting waiting for our flight because we have a 9 o'clock flight, and we landed in Miami around like 4 o'clock. So we had pretty lengthy layover. And I remember turning to my wife and man, I said, "Hey man, like, you know, I don't like flying, but I love planes. It's the most like, it's the craziest. I'm nuts." And so I remember sitting at the airport saying, "You know what? I should become an air traffic controller." And my wife was like, "Yeah? Well, you got that?" I'm like, "Man, like I'm sitting here, these planes are taking off. Man, that would be a great job. Like it keeps me like giving me adrenaline. Like I'll be, you know, I like planes, but I don't like flying, so I'll be on the ground." And so these conversations are going on, and I'm sitting to myself going like, "What am I like in my mind? I'm like, what am I losing it, dude? Like, am I going crazy, dude? Like, um, so a couple of weeks go by, you know, I'm kind of flirting the idea. My attention span for certain things aren't very good at times, right? Like baseball's always good.
Right.
And I remember my agent reaching out to me and saying, "Hey, there was a job potential with the Marlins, you know, but they ended up giving it to another guy." I'm sure I shortened that story a little bit, but they ended up giving it to another guy. I actually work with that guy now that they gave the job to, so it's crazy. But um, he said, "What do you think about like coaching? I got a friend that works at IMG Academy, and I could reach out there to IMG Academy, and I can get you an interview." And I was like, "You know what, coaching? Man, I don't know if I want to coach, man. Like this baseball hurt my heart. Like good, you know, good things don't happen to good people. That always seems like the bad guy always gets." And like I'm serious. Like I'm being real. Like I've always kind of struggled with that. Maybe we can talk about that later on. But um, I remember going like, "All right, this coaching thing wouldn't seem that bad." And so I said, "Hey, yeah, reach out to the guys and ask them if I can do an interview." So I go down, I do the interview. I still was kind of in between whether I was going to play or not. And then it got to a point where I was like, "Dude, I'm done, dude. Like baseball, it ain't that serious, right?" Like I went, I did the interview, and it was awesome. I enjoyed my time down there at IMG. I did like a 1 month, or actually longer than that, like 2 months of like a part-time job where I'm like grinding, like back I'm like I'm in low A, dude, playing in Beloit. And I remember at the end of the summer, they offered me a full-time position. And so I had always loved hitting, but they were like, "Hey, we're going to ask you to be one of our main infield guys. Like, obviously, you'll be a head coach. You'll get a chance to kind of like dabble in everything." So I was like, "Yeah," I was all for it, right? Like, I always felt like I could connect with kids. It was probably the best thing that ever happened to me, X, quite honestly, because some of the people that I got to meet at IMG is actually who helped me pursue my passion. This is a great story, but I pursue my passion of starting my own company and hitting. Um, while I was there for about 4 years. I met two awesome people. I don't know if I should be saying this, but I'll say it. And I remember I was really contemplating leaving IMG just because I felt like there was nowhere else for me to go. I was a high school coach, and my mind doesn't do well with feeling trapped, quite frankly. And I started working on this idea, and I'll share it with you all one day, maybe on another podcast. But I'll show you my first drawings of my logo, and I'll show you my actual first image that was created of crabology. And like I remember talking, writing out my philosophy on what I believe with hitting. I remember in 2007, my manager Frank Krimlis talking to me about making sure that I keep the ball off the ground. I focus on getting the ball a little bit, not fly balls, but get the ball a little bit more in the air, because I had this manipulated swing where I would kind of like be a little bit too aggressive. And so naturally, I had some success with it, and usually success leaves clues. And so with a little bit of my success and the clues that were kind of being like laid out for me, I started digging into it a little bit more, and over time, my understanding of the technical part of the swing started to grow. Started to grow some more. I started looking at some of my swings from my best seasons, and some of the things that I was learning. Every time that I was learning this concept, it kept showing up in my own body of work, which I think is a great indicator of success. It's like a stock going in the right direction. Typically, there's some underlying fundamentals that support the movement of that stock, and so I felt like it was the same thing for my swing. And so, long story short, I said I wanted to embark on my own individual journey of being an entrepreneur, and I'm going to do it with what I love the most in life. From a job standpoint, baseball just has always been. I always tell people it's like my interpretation of the world. It's like a good artist who utilizes drawings to kind of express what they're feeling and what they're thinking and what they're seeing. The baseball swing is very much the same for me. And so when I started Crabology, I dug into it. I got to work with, the bottom, and I don't mean this in a negative way, but the bottom of the barrel in terms of talent, young kids, right? Like they're not at their highest peak of talent. And then actually a better word would be skill. The bottom of the barrel was skill, and I learned how to help people acquire skill. And as I started to help them acquire skill, I started to develop different levels of interpretation or importance of what someone should be doing individually. And so obviously social media was starting to get big at that time. It was like perfect timing. And I remember starting an Instagram account. I don't really, I mean, I have a Twitter, but I try to do some digital minimalism to some degree. Quite, that's on purpose sometimes, because early on, you know how it is. You understand. It's a part of what we have to do, but nonetheless, I remember starting to post a little bit more, and some people started to kind of gravitate towards my philosophy, but not just not just technical philosophy, but my way of wording things.
The way you deliver.
And so, long story short, my delivery was rather than sending it DHL, I was sending it FedEx. Right? Like I had the ability to get it there a little bit quicker for some people. And so a couple of my buddies, Chris Woodward, who's the manager for the Rangers, he started following me on Instagram. Him and I were very good friends when we played, but we also had very deep conversations when we were roommates in 2009 in Tacoma. And it was a blessing again to get to meet him. But while I was at IMG, I got to meet some people who helped me back to that portion. They helped me start my company, and then boom, and then all of a sudden I'm a hitting coach of the Texas Rangers. So there's some more in there, but that's kind of like how the timeline started. So yeah.
You know what I kind of appreciate the most, and you touched on this, and I know this about you, is that you're so willing to learn, and you seem like somebody that's always trying to grab more information and figure it out, and that's something that I really admire about you. And obviously it speaks volumes on the way that you're able to present and deliver your thoughts on hitting, your tools, like a guy has a tool bag, he's got his toolbox, you're able to provide tools. But I just see you constantly learning. What's something you've gotten to a level where some people would say it's a peak, you're a big league hitting coach. What's something that you're still trying to learn today? What's something that you're still trying to master?
It's funny. I had this a similar conversation yesterday. So the reality is, in order for me to continue to grow as a hitting coach, it's not just going to be from the information that I acquire or the status that I acquire. It's going to be from the amount of service that I can give on a daily basis. I think I need to continue to get better at serving not only my players, but really anyone that I come in contact with. I think
how do you measure that? How do you measure that?
I think you measure it from the reactions of others. And not that I'm trying to get credit for anything. I think um, a coach is always going to be measured by their response of his players. And when a player knows that the coach is truly out for him, and there's no motive behind what they're doing, I think ultimately the sky is going to be the limit for me. And so I think if I continue to get better at that, I think it encompasses everything. I think I'll continue to educate myself. I'll continue to appreciate the situation that I'm in. I'm going to continue to make an impact in a way that is going to be less volatile and more organic.
Right.
And more consistent. So I think I think if I just continue to do what I've been doing and don't get complacent, I think there's no reason to believe that I won't be a main hitting coach for somebody's organization and then leading up or spearheading a philosophy from the top to the bottom. I believe that. I got a ways to go. It's funny, like I'm about to start work, like right now, I'm about to start expanding more during this pandemic. Quite honestly, I'm hoping that my story one day is going to be that I use the pandemic to grow my philosophies deeper for the one day that I do become a head coach.
Man, that's some great stuff, and honestly, we could go on all day about a lot of this stuff, but we have a limited amount of time. We both got kids, so we both got to handle that business side of things. But I just want to hit you with five extreme questions. You're on the hot seat now.
Let's go.
If you weren't a baseball coach right now, what would you be?
If I wasn't a baseball coach, I would probably.
I know you wouldn't be air traffic control.
I wouldn't. I wouldn't. I would probably be some form of a teacher. Probably a PE teacher. Our teacher is a little bit easier.
That's cool, man. If you could meet any celebrity in the world, who would it be?
Tiger Woods.
Tiger Woods. Oh yeah, I forgot you a golf man too. If you could travel anywhere in the world, where would you go?
I'm gonna say it because I mean I want to go to China, right? Given the situation, but I do want to go to China. I have a hope to visit China, or my second would be Australia. I would say it's a tie, China or Australia.
Two places I would love to go to. If you could go back and tell your 10-year-old self one thing, what would it be?
Tell my 10-year-old self one thing.
I guess it would be like telling your son the one thing that you could try to get across right now, right?
It ain't easy. I would probably say, hey, don't sleep on it because it's hard.
That's good. That's good. And the last one, if you could have one food for the rest of your life, what would it be?
Chicken.
What type of chicken are we talking about?
So really, quite honestly, any form of chicken. But I would say if I had to choose, I love chicken parmesan. Mm-hmm. I love grilled, seasoned barbecue chicken. To some degree, I'm a huge fan of grilled chicken. But I love Italian food.
What are we missing? What are we missing from Texas right now? Where's the spot you were hitting during the season?
Dude, there's a lot of good. I mean, straight up, dude, there's a lot of good spots in Dallas. Like that would be highly disrespectful.
Too hard.
If I pick.
I know you got to be missing some barbecue too, right?
Dude, they got great. I mean, great barbecue. But there's a place, a couple places. There's a place called Nick and the Sam's. That's where a lot of like celebrity. I mean, I don't know how I got in there, but a lot of celebrities had like unbelievable fish there. I saw that celebrity chef that's on that one show. Help me out. His my kids love him.
Not the Hell's Kitchen dude.
Yes, him.
Okay.
I was at a restaurant there, and I think it's the Capitol or something. I can't remember. It's like the Capitol, but I walk in there, dude, and he's in there, bro. Like he's in there walking around, like
So you know they
teaching.
got to have good food,
Dude,
right?
and it was God, I can't remember the name of the place, but it was unbelievable. I mean, sushi. I like sushi. Dude, Texas got good food. I know everybody like. Sometimes it could be a little bit. They talk too much about Texas.
That's a whole nother podcast.
Right, we could do a whole nother podcast, but I got to give you some credit. There's some good food there.
Yeah, for sure, man. Well, Callix, man, super pumped that we were able to have this conversation, and I know we'll have you on again soon. You just got too much knowledge and too much information to provide. Man, and we didn't even get into a lot of other stuff that I wanted to talk about too. But yeah,
let's do it again. Let's do a part two.
We'll definitely have to do a part two, man. I appreciate your time, and best of luck to you when the season gets going. Best of luck to you guys, and stay healthy, stay blessed over there, and stay safe. Thank you.
Nice, appreciate you having me. Very nice, nice job getting very good content to people. Content that's going to inspire, motivate, educate. Anytime you want me to come on, I would. Obviously, I value you and what you bring to the table. I know that we had a very short amount of time spent together, but I felt like the time was valuable for both parties. And so, anytime I can come on and chat, I would love to. Get me away from my kids' schoolwork.
Definitely, man. All right. Well, thanks again, and we'll talk to you soon.
All right, X. Peace.
All right.